Welcome to the Desert Lair, episode 10. I'm Dustin. This is a series of first impressions. So, trying a malt whiskey from every actively producing Scottish distillery that has a standard available bottling of malt whiskey. Preferably their flagship malt with a little bit of flexibility in there. The point of this is to establish a baseline of distillery character with a heavy emphasis on price to performance to help me determine which distilleries I want to explore more and which ones maybe I don't. I don't want price to performance to be the be-all, end-all of how I approach a spirit, but it's pretty important and something that we need to discuss. To help facilitate this, I've started a spreadsheet. There's a link in the description. The primary sorting is by score, high to low. Secondary sorting is price, low to high. I'll post a picture of that over here later at some point in time during this review. I took a couple weeks off. Pops was in town, so instead of filming these videos, I hung out with him. At some point, I'll try and pull him in on these videos. I did try. He wasn't having it this time around. We'll work on him a little bit. He likes to drink whiskey too, so at some point maybe I can get an alternate or an extra opinion on scores for some of these whiskeys, just so we'll have an alternate take on the spreadsheet maybe. Like I said, we'll work on him. We'll needle him a little bit. Maybe give him a few drinks first, and then try and get him on. Loosen him up a little bit. So we'll see where that goes. Today, this time around, we have the Glen EP10 here. Glen Distillery is owned by Campari Group. Obviously, they have Campari. They also have Grand Marnier, Sky Vodka, Wild Turkey, 40 Creek, Appleton Estate, so Jamaican rum. We will talk about Appleton Estate and other Jamaican rum and rum in general at some point. Several years probably in the future at this point, but we'll get around to it eventually. This one, 40% ABV. I do not believe it is natural color, although it is fairly light. It is chill filtered. This one is a bourbon cask. I bought this bottle in December of 2024. I paid about $51. This is a 700 milliliter bottle, which means that this 50 milliliter pour is about $3.64. Locally, I cannot buy this one. It is not available locally anywhere that I can find it. I think maybe the 12-year-old is. Online, as of the date of this review, this is about the same price. It looks like it's $52 I can find it online for. So we'll get into the smell here. Vanilla, pear, general orchard fruit, a little bit of malt in there. Let's see what our box here says. Displays a bright golden color with a sweet pear and vanilla bouquet. Elegant single malt dances on the palate with gentle notes of orchard fruits and butterscotch. The finish is satisfyingly long and complex. On the nose, sweet pear, vanilla. Yep, definitely get that. And vanilla, that orchard fruit, bourbon cask, Speyside. Taste, pears and syrup, plum juice, a little bit of honeyed malt. There's a slight custardy note that comes through on the finish as well. Honey-covered flan. For this one, you can see I have a group of tumblers over here. This is a whiskey that I actually prefer in a tumbler. Several different tumblers here. This one, from a tumbler, I just get a lot more of that custardy note. I think just the way that a tumbler delivers it over the palate, I prefer that as opposed to one of these glasses that's designed to enhance the aroma. Again, I get in the taste, there's just a lot more of that custard note up front. as opposed to drinking from this glass. And, you know, again, just the way that spirit is delivered over your palate is different based on the different glassware. So not only the width of the glass, but also the thickness of the lip. So these are fairly narrow compared to obviously these glasses, and the lip is probably a little thinner. So this tumbler has a fairly thin lip. You probably can't see these on camera in here. This one kind of has a medium thin lip. This one's kind of a medium thick lip. And this one's got a pretty chunky lip on it. I prefer kind of this medium thin lip, at least for this particular whiskey. Some of them I prefer the thinner lip. But again, experiment with glassware. Different whiskeys will taste different from different glassware. Some of it I feel like sometimes is placebo, but it's, you know, it's just how it's delivered over your palate. The thickness of the glass, the width of the glass, so forth. I really like this one as a drinking whiskey. There are times when I want to sit down and nose a whiskey and really analyze it and just sit and pick it apart. And for that, it's nice to have a more complex spirit, something that you can really dig into. On the flip side, there are times when I just want to pour a drink into a tumbler and kind of sit back, relax, and sip on it without really thinking much about it. In that regard, I really like Glen 10. I think it does exceptionally well in a tumbler. It's not real complex, but I like that custardy note that I get from it. And this is a whiskey that I can get in trouble with because I can easily drink more of it than I should. It would be very easy to drink half a bottle of this before I realized that I've probably had far more than I should to drink. So I have to kind of pay attention to that and just be careful. It's easy to just drink this stuff down and not really pay attention. This is also one where technical score, again, does not always reflect your enjoyment of a whiskey. So score-wise for this one, 82 out of 100. So it's a decent malt, but my enjoyment of it from a tumbler definitely outweighs my enjoyment trying to pick it apart, and I really like it from a tumbler. It's a very good drinking, sipping whiskey, and I appreciate it for that. So again, experiment sometimes. Maybe you find a whiskey that is a little underwhelming when you're trying to pick it apart, but you pour it into a tumbler and drink it, and suddenly you get a lot more from it, or you enjoy it more in that particular vessel or that format, I suppose. The one thing I do want to do before we end this here, I want to read the Master of Malt website. This is entitled, maybe I'll put the spreadsheet up here right now while I'm reading this, and you can take a look and try and pay attention as I read at the same time, or not, either way. This is the Master of Malt website. They sell whiskey, spirits, and so forth. WTF is going on with all these tariffs? Question mark, exclamation point. TLDR, the US is now charging a 10% tariff on both goods and shipping, which is shown at checkout, so there's total clarity on what you'll pay and there are no extra hidden fees. What you see is what you'll pay. In short, President Trump believes the USA has been getting a raw deal since the Second World War because they've been covering most of the cost of maintaining the post-war world order and at the same time running up massive trade deficits because, he believes, other countries have put up both tariff and non-tariff barriers against American goods to protect their home markets. So he's implemented huge, but varying, tariffs on pretty much everyone in order to redress the balance of trade. Each tariff is a simple function of the trade deficit in goods with that country. So a larger deficit means a larger tariff. In round one, everyone got a 10% tariff plus a bonus tariff of between 10 and 25% for most countries. So almost everyone in the US was paying between 10 and 34% more on anything they bought from a US trading partner. That lasted only a few days because the global stock market crash basically made everyone shit themselves and call on Trump to take it easy. So the bonus tariffs were rolled back, round two, but the base 10% tariff remained in place. So when President Trump says tariffs has been paused, he means part of some tariffs have been paused because that 10% is still there. Shipping. Here's a fun thing. It turns out that the 10% tariff also applies to shipping. Not only do you get to pay an extra 10% on top of the price of goods, but you get to enjoy an extra 10% on the cost of shipping also. That means if the shipping costs half as much as the bottle, which it often does because shipping is wildly expensive now, you're effectively paying an extra 15% on top of the price of the bottle. So that sucks. But wait, there's more. If all that sounds a bit too simple for you, don't worry, there's more. The tariff is not based on where the product was shipped from, the UK, but on where it was made. So the Cavalon had a 32% tariff, although now down to 10%. What does that mean for the dram sets and calendars? There's a link here. It says you had to ask. When you follow that link, it is a video from one of my favorite TV shows, Red Dwarf, that is complete bonkers nonsense. And I think that it does a good job explaining what's going on. It mirrors the situation. In any event, I'll provide a link to this in the description. You should also follow the link that they link to Red Dwarf because it is hilarious. But back to this, what does that mean for dram sets and calendars? It means some poor sod has to spend about 500 hours working out the tariffs on every dram and every set only to have all the tariffs change again the next day. Pity him. Who pays these tariffs anyway? While the spin here is very much that companies selling to America will pay these tariffs, the reality is that this is just a consumption tax on American businesses and consumers. Because the tariffs apply equally to all competing retailers in the UK, it just lifts costs evenly for everyone. So any competitive dynamics are unchanged. Anyone who had the space to reduce prices would have already done so. And the addition of tariff makes no difference to the cost benefit of doing that. At any rate, no company can afford to just take a 10% discount and keep trucking. Competition means prices are already pretty close to as low as they can be for most things, so nobody is absorbing these. Everything is just getting 10% more expensive for anyone living in America. So these really are just a new consumption tax on all American consumers and businesses. So what's the purpose of all this? The stated goal is to redress the trade deficit by forcing global companies to move manufacturing to America because it's the only way to serve the American market cost effectively. Another stated goal is to raise a lot of additional tax revenue so other taxes can be reduced. At best, one of those can be met in the long term as they're somewhat mutually contradictory. But maybe in the short term, it raises a load of tax, and in the long term, it forces companies to onshore manufacturing. Will this work? How the hell would we know? And if you're getting your economic forecast from a whiskey website, then you probably got bigger problems in your life. Wink face. Most economists are convinced that tariffs hurt both parties in a transaction. Weirdly, this view doesn't seem to translate to also being against income tax. Well, income taxes are a slightly different thing. So the effect will be terrible for everyone, including America. But economists are pretty shit at forecasting. So who knows? Maybe the second and third order effects of this will indeed line up to be in America's interests. Maybe all this is just posturing and there will be a flurry of deals. In a few months, all this talk of tariffs will be old news and we'll be on to the next thing. We can only hope. Until then, our American friends are sadly stuck paying an extra 10% on both goods and shipping. Sorry about that. Cheers, your friends at Master of Malt. There's also a PS here. I'm not going to read the PS. I'll leave that up to you. I think that's all I've got for this one. you know, it is what it is. Drink responsibly. Don't drink and drive. Use the rideshare apps. Don't be a dick. Thanks for stopping by. See you next time.